Hey there, Tank here. Out of all of the Imperium's soldiers, none are as powerful as the Primarchs, handcrafted by the Emperor himself over 10,000 years ago. They are his sons and his greatest tools. Today I will tell you of the first of the Emperor's sons, the one considered the greatest duelist of the nigh godlike Primarchs and most recently awakened of them, Lionel Johnson. I'll cover his laws specifically, but don't fret, his stats are going to be in a separate video which will come out a little down the line. So as always, sit back, relax and enjoy the video. Lionel Johnson, as you may know, is among the Primarchs who were made by the Emperor on Terra. However, through the meddling of the ruinous powers, he found himself stranded upon the feudal death world of Caliban, covered in forests inhabited by horrendous beasts which had been mutated by the warp. Upon his arrival, Lionel Johnson, though he didn't have that name yet, spent an unknown amount of time as a wild man, living separated from the rest of the human population before being found by a knightly organization known as the Order. Due to his inhuman nature and near unnatural ability to survive in the wilds of Caliban, he was almost executed by the Order as if he was one of the great beasts. The only reason Lionel Johnson survives to this day is because a man named Luther decided to take him in and properly induct him into the Order. After taking him in, Luther would finally grant him the name Lionel Johnson, meaning the lion, son of the forest in the Calibanite language. Old Johnson was soon taken to the main fortress monastery of the Order, known as Alderuk, where Luther acted as his mentor to teach him things more befitting of civilized humanity. L. Johnson's superhuman abilities allowed him to quickly rise through the ranks of the Order, reaching the highest ranks among them in a short time, at which point he rallied the knightly orders of Caliban into a crusade against the great beasts which had threatened them for centuries. The Knights of Caliban, with Lionel Johnson and Luther leading them, waged a bitter war against the great beasts, with hundreds falling to kill even a single one of the abominations. Despite such losses, the lion powered onwards, each defeated beast providing a boost to morale and more recruits willing to fight for their salvation. When the crusade ended, Caliban was cleansed of the great beasts. However, despite their combined effort, Lionel Johnson received the praise and honours of leading the crusade, while Luther got little if any recognition in comparison. As he was fully surpassed and eclipsed by his once pupil and brother-at-arms, the first sparks of jealousy found their way into Luther's mind. This was not L. Johnson's intention, as his time as a wild man meant he never learned why humans value titles and the like, but it was already wrought. There may have been a chance for the wound to Luther's pride to heal during Caliban's new peace. However, it did not last, as the Emperor soon descended upon Caliban in search of his son, heaping ever more glories upon Lionel Johnson, such as the First Legion of Legionis Astartes. Now that the lion had been found by the Emperor, he was given command of the 4th Expeditionary Fleet of the Great Crusade. Some of the earliest campaigns Lionel Johnson took part in was the 2nd and 3rd Rangdan Xenocides. The Rangda, which were thought to be extinct, re-emerged to terrorize the northern borders of the Imperium, and upon doing so came to blows with the First Legion, alongside several Titan Legios and Mechanicum forces from Zana II. During the Xenocide, the lion proved himself as an immovable object against the unstoppable force of the Rangda, standing tall not as a figurehead, nor some golden hero, but as an icon of sheer endurance, drawing others to fight through the simple honor of fighting alongside a Primarch. By the time the Rangda were finally wiped out, the Dark Angels were only a tenth of their original number. After recovering somewhat from the losses of the Rangdan Xenocides, the Dark Angels found themselves fighting alongside the Space Wolves on the world of Dulan. The governor of the planet, a man named Durath, denounced the Primarchs of the Space Wolves, swearing to feed his heart to his pet Grox. This enraged Russ, who fully intended to end Durath by his own hands. Due to the reckless strategy of Liam and Russ, Lionel Johnson decided to leave his brother behind in a successful attack which finished off the governor. After the battle, Russ stormed into the fortress and struck the lion, resulting in a brawl between the Primarchs, which lasted for 1 day and 1 night, and it ended once Russ ceased his struggle and began to laugh, realizing just how ridiculous the squabble was. This did not stop the lion, however, who knocked Liam and Russ out cold with one final blow, and by the time Russ woke, the Dark Angels had moved on to new battlefields. One of the later conflicts overseen by the Lion was the subjugation of Sarosh. Sarosh? Maybe. The Saroshi were a people ruled by bureaucracy who had expressed an interest in joining the Imperium. However, unbeknownst to the First Legion, the Saroshi worshipped a group of warp entities known as the Melikim, and saw the state-mandated atheism of the Imperium as complete evil. The High Lord Exactor, the leader of the Saroshi, was invited aboard the Lion's flagship for diplomatic talks, but it didn't get far as the Lord Executor denounced L. Johnson to his face, which led to him being impaled by the Lion's power sword. Little did the Lion know, the Saroshi delegation had brought a nuclear device hidden in their shuttle with the intention of assassinating the entire command structure of the Dark Angels in a single strike. This was stopped by Luther and a junior librarian named Zahariel El Zurias, who ejected the device into space before it detonated, though Luther admitted to Zahariel that he had considered allowing the device to detonate unhindered due to a jealousy in his soul. Upon being informed of the attempted assassination, the Lion bore his wrath upon the Saroshi, bringing them to heel for their treachery. Once the Saroshi were crushed, he turned his attention to the Space Marines of the First Legion, from which he gathered 500, including Luther and Zahariel, to send back to Caliban. During the last stage of the Great Crusade, while multiple legions fought the Orcs during the Ulanor Crusade, Horus diverted the Lion and his legion to far-off battles, so they would not gain the favour of the Emperor, which would have led him to choose Lionel Johnson as War Master. By the time Horus planned to enact his heresy, the Dark Angels had returned to their full strength, operating across large swaths of the Imperium. Due to the size and strength of the First Legion, Horus feared their interference could end his heresy, which meant he ordered the Lion and his forces to the border territories of the Imperium. When Horus and 7 other Primarchs finally decided to renounce the Emperor with the Istvan III atrocity, the Loyalist forces were scattered around the galaxy. Despite the rapid mobilization of 7 entire legions to combat Horus, the Dark Angels were far too enmeshed in their current campaign to join them. To provide as much support as he could, the Lion ordered the Dark Angels' reserves to resupply and prepare to do anything in their power to weaken the traitor legions. The first step in doing this was by securing the forge world known as Diamat, and several massive siege engines known as Ordinati, from raiding forces who hoped to use it in the Siege of Terra. Despite the effort of securing the Ordinati, Lionel Johnson was met by Perturabo, whom he gave the siege engines, not yet aware that Perturabo had already sworn his allegiance to Horus. After managing to end the campaign, tying the Dark Angels down, the Lion made use of a sentient artifact capable of incredibly precise warp jumps to find and break the Night Lord's legion, mortally wounding Conrad Kurz. Kurz managed to counterattack after recovering from his wound, taking his first captain Sevatar and the Atramentar Terminators in a boarding action on the Dark Angel's capital ship. It ended horribly for the traitors, as all but a dozen of the Atramentar died, and Sevatar and the remaining survivors were captured. Kurz, in order to survive, fled into the bowels of the ship, terrorizing the mortal crew and slaughtering Astartes until the Lion himself began to hunt for the Night Haunter. Somehow, the Night Lords managed to carry him escape into the void of space, while the Lion's hunt for Kurz was unsuccessful. After the Word-Bearers had managed to conjure a warp storm, known as the Ruin Storm, the Dark Angels found themselves cut off from Terra. Taking any route they could, they managed to lock onto a device known as the Theros on the world of Sotha in Ultramar. This allowed the Dark Angels to traverse the warp and meet up with the forces of the Ultramarines and the Blood Angels, where the Primarchs of each legion would convene and form the Imperium Secundus, as a way of continuing the fight against its chaos. The formation of Imperium Secundus was marred slightly when Conrad Kurz escaped the Lion's flagship and began to rampage across Macragge. It took the efforts of both Guilliman and the Lion to corner Kurz, who escaped yet again when he brought a chapel down on their heads, which they only survived due to the loyalist Iron Warrior's warsmith known as Barbarous Dantioch bringing them out in the last second. Eventually, the Lion tracked Kurz to the Zepath system, where he and his Dark Angels stood battle with several traitor legions, eventually emerging victorious. The Night Haunter, however, was nowhere to be found. This led to the Lion returning to Macragge to flush out rebels who he was certain were led by Kurz. His initial plan was to saturation bomb the region to ensure the total destruction of the rebels and Kurz, which was stopped by Guilliman and Sanguinius, who both wished to prevent civilian casualties. So to find Kurz, the Lion ordered the deployment of the Dreadwing to flush him out, while the Lion did direct battle with Kurz in the city of Alma Mons. After bringing Kurz to his knees, Lionel Johnson tore off his battle plate's power pack, lifted him over his head, and brought him down spine first onto his armoured knee. Kurz was brought to trial before a triumvirate, during which Kurz accused the Lion of planning to go ahead with the bombardment despite his orders not to. Because of this, the Lion was then banished from the Imperium Secundus. Before Kurz was supposed to be executed, The lion returned to stop his brothers by convincing them to use Kurz's precognitive abilities for their own benefit. In the wake of the trial of Kurz, the three Primarchs decided to abolish Imperium Secundus, seeing it as a mistake. After breaking their way through the Ruinstorm with force, the legions of the three Primarchs would separate for their own purposes to help the war effort, with the lion taking his legion on a purging campaign of several traitor legion homeworlds, such as Chemos and Barbaros of the Emperor's Children and Death Guard respectively. Upon joining with the remaining forces of the Space Wolves and Raven Guard, L. Johnson decided to make his way towards Terra. However, they arrived too late to change the outcome of the Siege of Terra, or to prevent the Emperor's mortal wound. Racked with grief over his inability to reach Terra in time, Lionel Johnson returned to Caliban to recuperate his losses and replenish his legion, only for his fleet to be fired upon by the planetary defences as soon as they approached. Clearly confused, the Lion learned from a passing merchant ship that Luther had taken control of the garrison in Caliban. Seeing the taint of chaos had taken hold of his former brother and mentor, the Lion ordered a savage orbital bombardment upon the planet to cleanse it of chaos. All the while, L. Johnson personally led a strike force into the fortress monastery of the Order in which the renegades had taken cover. Meeting Luther in combat, the Primarch and chaos-enhanced Space Marine leveled the monastery while the continued bombardment cracked through the crust of the planet. The battle ended when the Lion was struck with a psychic attack which seemed to mortally wound him. As though a veil had been lifted from in front of his eyes, Luther fell to his knees, unwilling to fight. Upon realizing that they had lost yet another of their pawns, the enraged Chaos Gods sent a warp storm which destroyed almost the entirety of Caliban, save for the fortress monastery, which was protected by a powerful defensive shields capable of holding what was left of the planet together. The Space Marines Luther had converted were sucked into the warp to be spat out across time and space, and by the time reinforcing Dark Angels reached the monastery, the Lion was nowhere to be seen, while Luther sat there, gibbering about how the Watchers in the Dark had taken him. Unbeknownst to the Dark Angels, the Watchers in the Dark had taken Lionel Johnson deep into the Fortress Monastery, where he was kept in a dreamless sleep in order to heal from his wounds. After 10,000 Terran years of bliss sleep, the Lion finally awoke during the Arks of Omen campaign. Despite this, long before his return, multiple worlds reported the appearance of a figure which appeared from the mist to cut down monsters like chaff before vanishing, and after his return, the Lion retained this ability, being able to appear and disappear through means known only to him. And that is the end of the Lion's story so far. There'll probably be books which expand upon his lore in the era Indomitus, but that is what we have for now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening. This has been Tank of the Line. You have been the Watcher in the Dark hiding in my walls. See you next time.